Well, welcome to the ITAM Kitchen, the place where we have lots of great discussions, and we're trying to figure out, okay, what's cooking in the kitchen, the ITAM Kitchen, that is, because you never know what we're going to do, what we have there that we're going to make. It could be a masterpiece, it could be a disaster, but no matter what, I always find it's tasty. I don't know about you, Rob, but I know it's always tasty whenever I make something. And it's like, that's the most important part. It's not how it looks sometimes, the results. I'm not that perfect chef, but if you can make it tasty, sometimes the rest of it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
See, I geek out on the process, on the way to get the thing at the end. So
that's true. That's true. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we can talk about lots of things. Like I have this Death by Chocolate cake. Oh my gosh. Okay, now you're making me hungry. So let's get back on topic at the moment, but there we go. Well, my name's Bill, Mr. Bill. I'm a recovering IT practitioner here. I'm a host here for the ITAM Kitchen. I'm also a founder of the IT Management Co-op. Co-op actually where we talk about asset management in a whole different realm, about that execution going to that next step. And we have the ITAM Kitchen because we want to provide more visibility, more insights, go to that next step. Because honestly, it's not there. It's going to figure out, okay, how do we put this and put topics that are real topics we're going to talk about that typically for me, I don't know about you at conferences, Rob, for me, I'd usually go to a conference and we talk to someone at the bar, right? And after drinks and talk about the different topics. Those are what we talk about every day here, right? And the reality. And honestly, an hour goes by really quick when Rob and I get together. We found that out. And sometimes we have Deanna and we have some other special guests that join us. And they're missed. And hey, everybody has to learn it works. So I totally get it. And this is also about being able to say, okay, how can we put that next step forward, right? Because when you start working with thousands of different practitioners over the years and 30 years working with it, and you start stacking up all the great stuff, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if no one else is able to use it. And that's what we're trying to do is make this usable. So with that, Rob, you want to introduce yourself and then we'll get kicked off on today's topic, which is going to be exciting and talk about some of the alignment we're talking about right here.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Rob Collins. I'm a 30-year plus practitioner of IT asset management. I really started out when I was in the U.S. Marines back in the late 80s. And then I came through government service in two different agencies with the state of Florida, the Department of Environmental Protection and Highway Safety Motor Vehicles. And that was a beautiful experience working through all of that and that concentration on IT asset management and those systems that are used in it. And then finally, the last 5 years I spent in more private industry consulting experience all around ITAM focus. So here we are today, and let's proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, I'll be honest, I've done more video now since the pandemic than ever in my entire life, and I'm having a blast. See, what I find is you get in those small groups and you go to conferences, you get maybe 400 people at it. The only time I had more than that is usually it was at an HP conference, which you get probably 10,000, or you can go to ServiceNow conference, you probably get close to 20,000 or things like that. It just depends upon your number. But you get the knowledge and you get kind of the pitch given to you. Here's what's forthcoming. But sometimes you're not able to figure out, okay, how it really works, that dialogue, right? And today we're going to talk about how the automation with the move, add, change in our break fix teams, as well as how we're going to align back to ITAM to make sure we are aligned. Because keep in mind, the accidental Cmdb scenario is we have two different environments. One's an environment, we're talking about an insurance company, mid-size type organization, and very well-known name, but they're struggling because they actually are moving from ServiceNow. They made a conscious decision to move from ServiceNow to Freshworks because of financial reasons. Okay, fine. It's product costs, and we know ServiceNow can be extremely expensive. Nothing new there. I'm not trying to slam anybody. And by the way, there are no endorsements by any of the organizations. We're actually doing this on our own from an awareness standpoint. I just want to make sure to put that little disclaimer in there. So you have that one scenario, and you have that scenario also where they're doing asset management and software asset management really well. And management says, you know what? You're doing so well, throw Cmdb into the picture. You're going to bring it online as well. Yeah. It's like, really, it's just something simple. We can make it happen. What the heck? There's nothing else to do.
Still,
that's scenario A. But at the same time, we're working on scenario B that's actually a bank, small to mid-sized bank. And
right.
from that bank, they're actually, you have a similar type scenario with the products. You actually have Sharewell, and Sharewell is being end of life this year. And then this organization decided to go to Freshworks again because of cost, and they're not that big. What the heck? Let's put a small tool in there to track tickets and have our Cmdb as well as put it forward. And no, they didn't want anything as robust. It's like, okay. And as well, in this case, the asset manager, who also does software asset management, was communicated to, oh, by the way, you're going to deploy the Cmdb while you're at it. It's going to be your responsibility. Bring it online. So two completely different worlds, very similar scenarios, and how to bring this on board. And for the entire month, if you've not seen the previous views, you can look on LinkedIn. How do you do a search on that? I'll have to say, okay, reach me out to me if you figure it out, because sometimes it's hard for me to figure out too. Or you can go on the YouTube channel, which is at ITAM Kitchen. You can see it right here on the display at ITAM Kitchen on the YouTube, and you'll see everything right there. But where we're going with this is being able to say, okay, how are we working through this? How do we go that next step? Because being an old end user support guy myself, I totally understand this realm. Totally. And keep in mind, I've been doing asset management for a while too. But that's where I started, right? When you get called, you're being very reactive. Excuse me, you're being very reactive. How do you move that forward, right? And sometimes you're not caring. I'll be honest, you don't care about what you're working on. It's going to be an after the fact because you're trying to get a user up and productive again. That's your core purpose in life. And I know when I did that, Rob, when I talk about we're talking about move, add, change automation, right? In ITAM alignment. When I talk about get that service ticket, and trust me, I used to get those paper tickets you print out, and I remember it was just paper without even capturing a database. I actually created an Access database the first time I was doing this, because it's like, I used to be an Access programmer. It's like, why are we doing it all via paper? So, oh yeah, no, it goes back in there too. And so you have a paper and you go out to visit the customers. Okay, how do you get them online, et cetera? It's a little bit different today than it was, unless you're in the office environment. There you go. But being able to help automate as much as you can and take the workload off of that end user support person is extremely critical. Because if you can automate as much as possible, they have enough things already on their plate. Because I knew I was doing that. I was doing servers. I was doing data center. I was being called for a little of everything. I don't care if it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I used to carry a pager and be able to solve things, right? And what the interesting part is with this automation, Rob, for me, is I would have loved to have some of the automation we see today in the workflow automation, et cetera. But I also realize that there has to be a check and balance as far as, is the data correct? Can you always trust discovery tools to provide this automation, et cetera? So that's what comes to mind for me. What comes to mind for you out of this topic?
It's all over the place, really. I mean, starting just with the experience that you have, and like where I came into it, like when I first kind of took on asset management and operations management, because in a way they go hand in hand. In fact, that was a really good exposure, right? When we were going through, for instance, our very rudimentary ticket systems and realized that there are ways to associate like a listed inventory of our stuff. So that was part of it. When we get to the point where we automate is where we realized, we could go online and we can ping these machines. And if we can ping these machines, we can run commands like WMIC. So what we did is we ended up doing sort of a quasi-discovery process that would update. At first, we just did it like one time a week because we were busy with other things. But as the time led up and we were looking over things to improve, we said, well, why couldn't we go back and do this and, ping these machines at different intervals, like at logon, right? Because at logon, you also have the logon and whoever's signing in. So in that case, we could automate a couple of things. One, get me a fresh view of the current user. We'll call them the owner, even if it's just temporary, right? And then give me a view of that boot. Give me the view of baseboard when that boot occurs. So now you're getting service tag, if it's put in there, asset number, and all those associated bits of data, type of machine, right? Or maybe even a software list that comes off of it. So those are just a couple of just entry points for automation. Another great place for automation, right, would be dashboarding and emailing of reports from whichever system it is that you want to spread the knowledge or give a status update on, for instance, right? Platforms that I've worked in, we've been very fortunate in that at a given event, a trigger event, you can send emails. You could also, depending on the data that you're looking at, like what's our total spend for like this month, just within the hardware sector, just within the software sector, or wherever, right? You determine the parameters and you can base your reporting on that. And then one of the things that I did was I set up automatic emails that were run at 6 a.m. in the morning before anybody's expected to come in. So that by the time they come in 8 a.m., 9 a.m., and they've got their coffee in hand and they're all cozied in, they could get that information in front of them right away. If there are trigger events, they can be notified of that right away. And then they can take this and they could go into their week or their day in more or less a planning mode. So when you have this information, that's where you can start to move from reactive to proactive. And in the event that you need to know information and now you have to go chase it, the automation of having that data come to you and then for you to digest it on your own terms is another tremendous way to apply automation and chronological triggering that brings a terrific amount of value to your entire company.
Mm-hmm. Well, and there's one thing to say, one thing from an executive perspective, you're right. But I would say with this one, it's also about making it a little bit lower level, right? It is to understand, okay, the value to the actual individuals that it's impacting. In this case, the break fix teams, whether you talk about the networks, the data center, et cetera, because this is actually where we can also build support as far as our initiative that we're looking with an ITAM SAM or configuration management, right? And I think that's also very critical. What comes to mind when we hit the lower level type of value points there, Rob?
Well, let's see if we couldn't apply a better term to that, right? Let's call them your auxiliary units or your support units, for instance, because when we're talking about those levels, typically the strata is like high to low on like, those, what would you call them, like org charts and those organization trees, et cetera. But really what we're talking about is we're talking about somebody that's not focused at a higher level within the business, right? And instead the reliance on the support teams. So putting it from that perspective, for instance, the same data could be leveraged to assist those teams in what the work is that they should be doing at the moment. Like a lot of break fix occurs, but those are typically kind of scattered and sporadic and whatnot. You may have some new users that need to be supported, et cetera, right? But the information within the sort of dashboarding of the reporting that can help the technicians at that level are, a warning, for instance, that comes from the system monitoring. Any alert systems that you have down at the endpoint, or within infrastructure. They should be monitoring those things already, right? One thing to do around that is to go to them, ask them, hey, what kinds of information do you need? And do you have to chase that information? That's one of the greatest questions you can ask. If you want to look for ways to implement automation and reporting, dashboarding, and that, and alerts, that's what you really need to find out from them. Once you found that out, then you can start asking the question, out of the box, do the tools that I use, are they capable of supporting these specific asks for, let's say, the help desk team or the network infrastructure team, and you really should be coordinating with these people, your information security teams, as that marriage between InfoSec and ITAM really should be strong. And there should be a lot of two-way communication there. And I think we're trying to move towards that in the industry.
We are, and I think we've been working on that a long time. I think it's also about alignment and understanding where where the leadership thought is, right? Because there's one thing to actually, I know teams where they throw asset management on the end user support teams all the time, right? All the time.
Sure.
And I'm actually in the process of writing an article on this as well, because I don't think it gives the time of day to really understand what the value is. And I'll blame the industry for this as a whole, right? Because the awareness, as much as, okay, yeah, the awareness is, et cetera, you have the government regulations and asset management's now a topic. That's awesome. But the awareness is not where it needs to be. It's not. And I found this out in the operations team more than anyone else. If I'm going to point a finger anywhere, the operations team is they're so to their defense, they shouldn't care about asset management except for to say, okay, here's data. All they're looking at is reviewing it, right? Because asset management's not actually in their realm, and it shouldn't be, right? And that's where I think a lot of folks get upset or get misdirected. And they say, oh, you're part of the operations team. It's like, yes, so what? you're not, there's no support there, right? And I say that because asset management often, and we talk about configuration management in here too, right? You talk about updates, how you're looking at changes, how you're installing systems, how you're removing it, those collective things, right? Your end user support team, your just your support personnel, I'll just call it that, right? And it's no demeaning, engineers, support personnel, et cetera, whatever that level of discussion is, right? Because there's all sorts of titles. There's not much consistency out there. It hasn't changed over the years. It just depends on what the role is, the government or private or public. It depends what it is, right? Is making sure leadership, the managers put out there. For example, I know a scenario happening right now where someone has been put into a leadership role of a help desk, right?
Okay, that's great.
And from that person, they have no IT background, but they're in charge of service desk, right?
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying they can't evolve, absolutely should, but this person also says, yeah, don't worry about the hardware stuff. We're going to let our end user support team work with that now. They don't understand details.
Yeah.
It happens everywhere, right? You gain a role, have a new job, which I applaud them coming in the industry and have interest, but the person's getting disenchanted because the support that they had previously is no longer there for the role.
Yeah,
right. So you back to your automation, I kind of went down a different tangent here, but when you think from a support and automation, you want as much automation you can, the support, et cetera, but you also get disenchanted as an asset manager or software asset manager, even configuration manager, if you realize the team just doesn't have the bandwidth to do it, and leadership does not, and management does not understand the need why that needs to be overseen. As far as the move, add, change, and try to automate as much as possible, you still have to oversee this whole process.
Well, I think the important thing is, do you as the asset manager see the value in it? And if you do, then definitely pursue it, because there's so much there through automation and notifications and various other triggers that could be applied, and they ought to be applied, especially in that case, because the support's not there from management. Well, if you want to win that support, start the automation, collect the data, and let's get that in front of their faces. Look at the value and look at the opportunities that you have when that automation is in place. And this isn't getting all the way down into the details of what that automation is or the specific data. It's going to be on you and communicating with the teams that you work with to determine what's valuable to you. Along the way, you're going to find other things that are of value, and those are what you want to put up in front of them. Now, going in the other direction and in support of the teams that are doing the work or the support, you also want to find out what they need to see or ought to see to make their jobs better. Like, one of the pain points for me was, why do I have to manually enter some of these systems, while I'm trying to work on whatever it is, a ticketing system, a specific ticket, some kind of an inventory search, anywhere. I'd much rather start my typing and have my options come up in front of me. That can be done all the way down within the programming of whatever tool that you're using, including things like Microsoft Office if you are using Excel spreadsheets, and many do. So those kinds of automations are very simple, right? And they can help you quite a bit. And then, of course, they can extend and be much more technically detailed, and more complex. But the whole idea at the end of the day is that you're taking something that either has a great amount of labor cost, right, to get it, or to go research it, or to go find it. It's really manual. prone to error, which is those number of opportunities for error in any given process, they could be greatly reduced. That was the Motorola experience and learning from way back when that I've got. And so there's still value to it, and you still want to go ahead and get that effort started. And if you need help, try to find technical resources that really do understand either what it is that you're after or the data sources, right, that contain that information. Even if it's like I described before, you don't have a data source, so you have to use something as, let's say, as detailed or deep as like PowerShell commands to pull that together. But once you do have it, right, there should be some kind of a score about trustworthiness, correctness, and currency of that data.
Mm-hmm. Well, you should, and that's where the accountability comes in play, right?
Yeah. That could be automated.
But that's also the biggest gap we still have today.
Mm-hmm.
Is people being accountable for their own actions. Unless everything we've talked about to date, because we're on episode 10, right? Mm-hmm. What's the major thing that we've talked about throughout all these episodes so far?
We've talked an awful lot about the configuration management database, for instance, and asset management databases. We've also, gosh, there's so much. I don't know that I could put my finger on a single thing.
Well, it's more about the alignment.
Well, that's true, and that does. Alignment. And earlier today, in this episode, you also spoke about that. And so, yeah, the trigger went off for me, but we've talked about it so often, that alignment exercise between the business objectives, the IT support, and ITAM support of those, that's critically important. And if you needed some other starting point or justification, right, for putting automations and reporting in place, let the business objectives be the driver for that. Because if you're going to talk about it, who's your primary audience? We're talking about business objectives for the business.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be the executive level. And if you're doing that and you're cooperating with the others at the technical level or the support level, not only are you going to get more correct information and better decision making, you're probably going to get better support of each of these portions, these support organizations as well. So you could build trust in all of those directions. And as you do, you're going to get more cooperation out of the support groups themselves, and maybe even better authorization, let's say, and funding from the executive level.
Well, and sometimes it's even more powerful to be kind of the person behind the scenes of being the person up front in the leadership in this case, right? Because, well, I remember me, right? So, okay, you get the ego, you've got to make it happen, et cetera, and then you get that next role. And it's like, what in the world did I just step into? It was the dog doo-doo, right? And it's like, okay, because you realize I'm totally lost. I'm totally underwater. I'm going to do a different analogy there. I'm totally underwater. I'm trying to get air, and I have a different scenario, right? Well, sometimes where the leadership can help is they can help to translate what you don't understand. And that's important, right? Because there's that trust there. That trust happened there too, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes they've already gained their role. I mean, you've done government, right? So government is all about, okay, promoting and being there for a number of years and knowing people. That's really how the government part works. And you can expand on that at some point.
It does.
But you have someone who's been there and they understand some of the lay of the land. I'll just say it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a newbie just coming in and you're ready, if you're fired up, make it happen, you need somebody to say, Bill, I really appreciate the eagerness. You want to move forward. We don't move that quick.
Mm-hmm.
What you want to do within 3 months, we'll be lucky if we get done in 3 years. So let's see what I can do to help you out. I'm just using the example. That's a little extreme, but it's actually sometimes true. But but having someone help mentor you along the way on that, say, you might come back and say, you know what, this job's not for me. There's nothing wrong with that. But you have to figure out, okay, where do you sit, right? I know for me, that type of environment would drive me crazy because I've tried it. I've tried it multiple times.
Yeah.
I can't do it. It's just not me. I'll just put it that way. I appreciate the role and what it is, et cetera, but it's not my DNA. I use a little bit, I move quicker because just my brain goes nonstop. But I'm using that as an example, right? Does that make sense?
It does, and that kind of gets back to you made a statement about the accountability thing, but it was really it's huge. I mean, we could do a whole other that's a whole other topic
Actually, we
about,
should. Yeah, we'll do
about
that next week.
accountability.
Yeah.
Responsibility and accountability is a human thing, and it's broad and it's everywhere. These days, yeah, that's definitely a thing we could talk about. But I mean, if you come to a point where you realize this isn't the job for you, then step up and say something, communicate. It could be that just with a little training or a little familiarization or the right support, you might find that maybe it could be the job for you. And I would certainly try that before abandoning. But if you get to that point where it's not, then I just step up and say, look, it isn't for me. I can't really do this. I don't feel effective. And then make that decision, step away. Somebody else that does want to do the job, let's say, like for the technical minded folks, they really do enjoy that puzzle solving and whatnot. That's the perfect job for them. Well, then somebody else probably needs this role in particular.
Well, and keep in mind for where we are right now too, that you've got a lot of demands on yourself with both these scenarios, right? Bring up a Cmdb, you're doing asset management, software asset management. Okay, you have the politics, which is exactly what we're talking about right there. It's the politics and how you deal with the role. And as far as how you're moving forward is, okay, do your best with what you have, but it also helps provide yourself clarity. And that's what I've learned with projects like these, right? Provide yourself some clarity to figure out, okay, how am I moving forward? What's my future in this role? How am I going to work with this? Because I think that's also important as we talk about the automation and the alignment, et cetera, is we need to think about us, be a little selfish, right? Does that make sense?
Right. It does. If that's what you need, there is another great opportunity to apply automation, right? Sit down, make a list, draw it out on paper. What do I need? What do I need to be more effective? What do I need?
Exactly.
What do I need to facilitate others' effectiveness, right? That was one of the things that I did back at DEP when I first got the charge on our technical support team, our help desk team. And this is also where I initiated my IT asset management activity, right? I had to sit down and have that same sort of conversation with myself. And that's exactly what I did. I started writing down a list of those things that I know I need or want. And I knew that the systems existed to obtain this information. I just didn't necessarily know how to go out and get it. But you don't have to do it alone. I have technicians that just geek out on this stuff. I just love to do DBA and love to do reporting. And they love their jobs as well to do help desk. Sit down with them and say, what do you need? Right? And let's talk about how we go about doing this. I would do a team debrief every Friday afternoon before everybody was expected to leave. And these topics always came up because they did. I wanted to make sure that we took some accountability for those. Right. So in a leadership position, this is what I did. I also looked at the existing data that we had in our ticketing systems. And the first thing I wanted to do was make our customers happy. So I found what were the top 5 categories or the top 5 tickets problems that folks were encountering. I wrote that list and we sat down. Now, once we had the lists put together, then it was an opportunity for us to say, let's delegate how we go about getting this information and performing the automations. And we did that. And gradually what we did was we eliminated all of those categories of those tickets and incidents. So the next thing we do is like, let's grab the next 5, and just start working down in blocks. And that was a great way not only to establish what we had, but also to automate that reporting and that dashboarding so that we could know this going forward into the future. And then third, once we did the job one time, we didn't have to, reinvent the wheel each time. That was documented. And those automations were put in place and they were cataloged. So that this way, if we needed to re-implement, we simply go to the catalog and follow the process that we drew up. That helps leadership tremendously. And they did see the value in that. And as a result of seeing that value, we got better support to put the automation and even hire team members in order to have a more full experience. That was a beautiful success.
Well, let me ask the question with that. So that's a great example, right? Did the support eventually came from senior leadership, right? But to
Eventually, yes.
build upon that, you had to get the support amongst your peers first prior to getting the executive buy-in, right?
Peers and the executive support is where I targeted the
Hmm.
the
Sure.
follow on or the debrief, for instance. You come in, check out, hey, did this work out for you? Was the way we fixed it too, how you say, did it bother the business? Did it interrupt what you had to do? And then how do you feel afterwards? Do you feel like you got the support? Because for me at the time, my primary objective was to turn around the image of desktop support. They were
Sure.
arrogant and they were not liked at all. They would much rather, the engineer, for instance, would rather continue with the problem than to have somebody come and fix at the time. And so, from a leadership perspective, right, the idea of listing and automating for me had great value and potential. And I saw that. And it was completely changed the way that the folks viewed IT support in a big way. So getting
Hmm.
back to the answering your specific question, those feedback bits that we did back and forth also informed the executive level peers and their
Exactly.
subordinates. So now that positive feedback wasn't just a direct, it was also coming in from all directions.
And everyone online might say, well, why are we talking about buy-in, support, et cetera? We're trying to talk about automation and alignment.
Yeah,
Well, without the alignment with the people aspect, the rest of it's not possible. You
yeah,
never get buy-in to actually complete the task or say, okay, here's what I need to check on. Back to the accountability, right? So
yeah,
it's very relevant on that part. You have to think about the human factor behind this. It's not just about technology. We get
right.
so stuck in the technical weeds sometimes, just what we do, right? And we say automation, do the integrations, et cetera. Well, honestly, it's going to vary.
Yep. let's let's put a note, let's say on this episode, for instance, if we wanted to give a title to it, right? What we're really talking about is we're talking about what is the business value to
Mhm.
automation? What is the business
Right.
value to that dashboarding and that reporting? Right?
Yeah.
So we're addressing this question. And what we're trying to illustrate explains that it isn't necessarily visible to the executive leadership. It's why ITAM isn't necessarily taken seriously in so many places, even today,
Correct.
right? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to say, in order to show that greater business value, right? My suggestion is start that low level automation and see what comes of it and see where
Hmm.
improvements come. And now once you've got that, you have a case, a business case that you can
Exactly.
then put in front of senior
Huge.
leadership in order to get the support and the buy-in for your ITAM programs and for further automation.
Because when you start looking at that, then the
Right.
rubber's hitting the pavement, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you're able to have that momentum occur. That's all we're trying to say. Because honestly, automation, as easy as it sounds, technically, yes, it's easy.
Some of it, some of it might be.
90%, I say 80 to 90% of your effort is the verbal and in that alignment discussion you need to have with those individuals you want to automate and automate tasks for.
Yeah. Especially if you've got a really good working relationship in both directions, right? Because you can, and I did it all the time. I didn't necessarily know to write the code, but I could go to a resource that I'd already supported and that you know, how would you say, they were made happier and more full thanks to the support that was given to them. In exchange, if I came to them with an ask like, I just don't understand how to code this particular API, for instance, if you have an expert, can you do it? Can we mock it up, right? If we can mock it up and we can show the code and do all the troubleshooting, then we can go to change management and say we want to put this change in place. Here's where we're going to do it. Here's what it's going to do, and here's why we're doing the change with a business argument around or business case around putting it in place and what they're going to see. So, and you just do those a couple at a time, and that's another way that gradually you gain trust and you gain support, building it up.
Exactly. Exactly. Because again, the reason why I bring it up to this point, we're talking about those integrations. You want to make sure you put the right integration in place for the right people because you're also going to have
Yeah,
to stage this,
yeah,
right? And for the integration and why we're talking about at this point, it's like, well, it's probably already on the it should already be on the roadmap. It's just not. It just provides clarity on that roadmap.
Yeah.
To say, okay, let's think about break fix. Let's just go there, right? Are we talking about break fix in desktops, servers, networks, equipment? How are we looking at change management? How are we looking at that type of automation when we add change?
Yeah.
And what kind of devices are we doing it? Are we what are we bringing on initially versus what's in the future? Because I can tell you from experience, you try to bring it all on at once, you will totally tank.
You can't do it all at once. You got to pick and choose, and you got to prioritize.
Exactly. But that's also what is promised by the software vendors. Oh, you could do it. And the salesperson's going to say, sure, you do hardware, software, servers. We can do it all at once, right?
Yep.
Again, that is a jab, and it should be, right? But it's also about that clarity to say, what's the reality of what the business can take on?
I love that point. There's a couple of things that come out of that. The first one, let me just get it out of my head. It's like an earworm. It plays every so often, right? When I was doing the operations management back then, and I was making my users happy and keeping my systems up, high percent uptime and all that, right? I would constantly get some vendor that would come through, right? And if it was something that I was interested in, I'd reach back to the vendor and I'd say, the next time we talk about this, give me an engineering resource, please. I want a technical resource to explain the back end of this, and how we'd interface it, right? The salespeople would relent. They push back and they'd say, no, you don't understand. If you send me the tech team and make those contacts available, you're more likely to gain a successful sale. Because I understand the sales thing. You can do no wrong. You name the vendor or the product, it's always this way. But then when you actually go to implement, that's when you start running into those little roadblocks and obstacles. And then you need that tech support, which is why I advise if you get a product, you're definitely getting a support contract as well at implementation. They're going to help stand it up. They should, they can. And they've also hit those roadblocks before. So the expectation is it goes more fluidly from start to finish, and maybe even a shorter implementation time overall. But I involve the technical people, and I get my folks, my techs, sitting in the room too, to say if they bring something up, for instance, that maybe sounds a little, my BS meter is starting to go up.
Exactly.
The text can be like, hey, wait a second, man, that's not true. Or I don't know if you thought about this, but here's a better way to do it. The collaboration between you and the vendor is robust. You're making better decisions, you're better informed, and you're going to get better value out of the whole experience.
Correct. And you hit some of the key points, right? Because if you can't connect, you can't communicate, it means you can't lead the discussion.
Yeah. And then what do you do?
Which is the core of everything I do, right?
Yeah.
The core of the co-op, you see what we're doing on there, that's the core of what we do. And that's what we're talking about, because these are, again, conversations we're talking about in reality.
Yep.
Right. And the integrations, you say, oh, the product's all one product. And Freshworks is a great example. It's a good product for what it is, right? It has limitations like any product. I'm not going to ding it on that side. It is what it is, right? And these organizations made a decision, whether it's the insurance organization or whether you talk about the bank, they made a decision to go that path. That's great. Now we have to figure out how we can embrace it. We have the Cmdb, and we're talking about the updates, right? And you want to automate as much as possible, but we're also saying from an accountability, we're going to go back to that, right? Accountability, what type of visibility you're providing for these individuals who are making the changes? And here's where I go. I'll say I'm very old school. Well, you can call me old, but that's a whole different story. Old school for me, right, is I'm an old baseline inventory manager for assets.
Okay.
Where I literally bring in 10 temporaries, so contractors, to help perform baseline inventories throughout the entire, and go through the entire facility, put asset tags on there, track it, et cetera, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And I got inventories every time, right? Mm-hmm. Back then we were doing discount, so that's how far back I've done this. So literally, and tracked it, and I do reports, and I had reports for them in the morning to actually. And I did it twice a day. Well, I gave them their reports of the data they gave me back to them because I knew what assets they touched. And from that, I had them validate had them validate their own data. Now, if they didn't get validated, okay, we had a whole different discussion. Or if something was really bad, it allowed me to better understand what the data was going on. Because literally, I've got 10 people, say, doing, we used to do between 4 and 6 PCs an hour, which is not unusual when you're doing inventories, et cetera, right? That's actually a pretty good ratio. And you've got 10 people doing this. That's a couple hundred PCs a day, right? And sometimes you had servers, et cetera. But when you put the accountability, how I was going to review it, I wasn't in the room. I'm trying to manage it, oversee it, right? I'm not there putting the devices on and asset tags. I can do a spot check. But I also put the accountability back on my baseline inventory individuals to say, guys, check your data. If I see something else wrong and it's really crazy, we're gonna have a different discussion. Go fix it. I'm totally cool with it. But realize until you fix that, I'm not signing time cards.
How are you doing it? Like, what was that process like for the people? Because that seems a little bit unusual. And I know that, well, way back when I came up with this system, right? So initially, we were using surplus WASP scanners, the barcode scanners, and we created.
I was even before that.
We created labels and things. So for us, for instance, inventories didn't take nearly the amount of time as you're describing.
Well, correct. And keep in mind, I'm talking a while back, right? So, and you had sheets and paper and everything. Because I mean, literally, we were double and triple checking everything, right?
You know what, though? I think that this is a good place then to discuss that around automation and making things, doing improvements.
Correct.
That's a pretty scary point. That the people taking the inventory have to validate their data for a couple reasons. One, the process should be like as little error as possible, and the process should have as little human error as possible. If there's that amount, then I would say that the system needs to be examined or improved, and clearly it does. Plus, a simple accounting principle and security principle around separation of duties, where one person shouldn't be checking their own work, somebody else should be checking their work, right? So one person that's reporting, right, the data, somebody else should be doing all of your QA and your QC around that data before it goes anywhere. That was a great experience back at DEP because we had to report the data coming from all of those monitors out there around the state.
Oh yeah.
That was an excellent example too around automation, right? So for me, for instance, I would love sometime to get the details on how that operation ran from way back in the day, because that would give us a beautiful sort of timeline comparison of where automation and systems improvement through continuous improvement has come from way back then to where we are now.
Oh, it's exponentially quicker because when you start dealing with RFID, you start dealing with some automation. How you move it, say RFID even in data centers, right? The first time it's painful because you actually have to touch every system. Afterwards, you're literally going through with carts and realizing what's equipment's in the room. Night and day in comparison, you cannot. It's a small percentage of the same amount of time. Just as an example. So it has absolutely.
It depends on how that's implemented. When I worked back at Motorola, for instance, they had great systems. The security system was wonderful. You didn't have to scan a badge. Your prox badge, as soon as you moved within a certain radius of a sensor, you were automatically like badges identified, cameras can pick up images, they know who you are basically, or who's wearing the tag, and where you are in the building and whether or not you can even get through a door. So same thing with assets, especially on RFID tagging. I mean, once the system is up, all you've got to do is simply move it through the doorway into a space. And if the space is registered within the building, it's registered on the floor, it's registered within the site that it's registered. You now have, and geolocation can be additionally applied, you now have most of the where is it, right, for that part of an asset management tracking system. And again, that's very specific to asset management. Cmdb will share those attributes with that system, and it may store them on the moment. But more often than not, within the Cmdb, you're not going to get that automatic just because of the way that information is being used in the context of configuration.
Well, exactly. Because from to and where my brain goes there, right, is you start doing
Yeah.
barcodes. It's all about also about stock rooms, what's coming in, what's going out. And
Yeah.
that's usually where you have your the transfer occurs. I'll just say it that way,
That's
right?
right. Your move.
You have a lot of moves happening at that point, right? So you have equipment coming
Yeah.
in, equipment going out, and when you're tracking it, you may have a different vendor doing that. So you're actually getting files. So you have that type of automation. So how you're porting it in, you may not,
Yeah.
you may go direct because it's your equipment already. It's you're using their facility,
Yeah.
scan it. They're actually using it. You provide the process. See a little of everything on this part, and being able to say how do you do that, right? And you have to further refine that, but also get a congruence that is occurring and stay on
Yeah.
top of it. So here's what happens. Most of the time, people make assumptions it's occurring, and it's not occurring as far as the validation. Everyone assumes, even the executives assume once it's in place,
Sure.
it's automated, it's occurring, we can trust the data, et cetera. But there's no check and balance. And I say that being constructive because I'm an auditor. That's what I'm trained to be. And people's like, you're an auditor? It's like, as an asset manager, you actually are an auditor. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We audit everything. We audit process. We audit metrics. We audit data. That's our life, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's part of the role. But if you look at any job description, that's a good point. I need to add that in there. Auditing is part of what we do.
It is. Absolutely. And you have to.
And that often gets overlooked, right?
Unless you have like a high trust environment, and in the modern workplace, we're moving towards zero trust in so many other systems, right? Because you want that validity, at the moment, so that you can, let's say, put a trust stamp on it, like your beer born on date or whatever they're doing with those things these days, right? Just the timeliness of that record, because you're going to need to come back and do it again and again and again. And you're going to need to be able to explain any change in the information from audit to audit to audit, or inventory to inventory. That's why having those systems, that's a great place too, by the way, around IMAC, everything about that. What was that?
Oh, yeah.
Install,
Absolutely.
move, add, change. Install, I believe that's it. Install, move, add, change. So anything that happens with the devices or with the software, or other aspects, other CIs, right? You need to be able to have that record and explain any changes that occurred within them from point to point. It used to be, for instance, that I was going to move the machine from this floor, from this person to some other floor, room, and person, right? All that stuff was done, and many do, just through an email, right? And then there are smart ways to automate and pull those details out of emails if you put keywords in, etc., so that you can then automate the feeding of a list, but not necessarily a direct inventory, if you will, but the change from last inventory to current state. And that's very helpful, right? It could be very tedious to do if you have to do that stuff manually. Call somebody, tell them, have them type it into a machine. But if you could do that in other ways that make it so that not only are you getting fewer mistakes and accurate information at that moment, but you also have that record that you could go back and you can reflect on. It's going to support internal auditing, which hopefully are doing, and then any audits that come along the long way, external audits.
Well, it is, and that's actually a very key point, right? Because you have to look at that. That's exactly to your point. That is why we have move, add, change. That's the only way from an asset management perspective we know something has changed. So it's very important that for this integration to be in place, so we have that visibility. Now, we also have to keep in mind, how do we see this? There's one thing to automate and say Discovery is doing it, right? There's another thing to say we're part of the process. And what I mean by this process in this case is change management. Operational, if something on operation, it's got to be, especially Cmdb, right? They're looking at that. Well, they should also be looking at the asset management, not just the Cmdb, right?
Yeah, this is where ITAM is a supporting partner, for instance, for change, right? ITAM is a supporting partner for network infrastructure and InfoSec. That relationship now is being illustrated in many different ways. So it is critically important to do that. And if it's not feasible to do it manually, right, the reason why you would automate is because of that. So make it so that you automate so that this work can be done independent. Nobody needs to be bothered by it. So long as the work doesn't interfere with normal business operations or network communication, by all means, this is worthy of engagement.
Absolutely. And I say that, I provide that for clarity reasons, right? Because executives will say, you're integrating, make it happen, et cetera. They're not going to look about the details. They don't, to a degree, they really don't care. They just want it to happen, right?
Yeah, they don't.
But for you as a practitioner, us as a practitioner, we have to pay attention to that. And that's what typically gets skimmed over.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
Your operations manager, it's going to happen, discovery tool, because these folks are actually implementing new tools, right? In both these scenarios. The operations managers, you have discovery, it's automatically updated. Cool, I don't need to ask the manager anymore. That's exactly the thing goes through their mind.
You continuously, you have to have that. You may not, you'll need an asset manager. It's just that neither you nor the asset manager will have to do as much work to get the business value from this information and availability. I mean, the idea, right, that I came into back when I had the help desk support team way back when was I want the folks, right, to be able to do their work in the most efficient way possible so that they don't have to think about the problems. It's like learning how to drive, right? When you first start, you have to pay attention to where your hands are, where your feet are, where all the controls are, and what's in the environment around you. So in an early stage, that's difficult. There's a lot of processing that needs to be done. But later on down the road, a lot of these things have gotten all the way down to kinesthetic memory. It's gotten it down to the point where it's practically just reflex, go left, up and down on turn signals, making sure that your areas are viewed. These are just automated. So, and that's the whole idea, is you want to do the same thing around the various workflow processes that support the business and support the supporting teams for the business. Those are your opportunities. Automate those so that they are not top of mind for anybody involved. Business can focus on business. Support can focus on supporting business.
Exactly. And we've kind of, and I love where we've gone, right? So back before Rob and I even started joining for today, we talked about, it's like, oh gosh, this is our passion. This is just where we've been. And you guys have seen us talk about all sorts of things over the last hour, right? But these are also very critical points that you want to make sure you're driving for your organizations. And in these organizations, we have the bank and we have the insurance organization, right? And they're struggling with this. They're going to struggle with this because this dialogue doesn't happen in 1 hour the way we just talked about it. This happens in weeks, if not months, right? Maybe some days if you can shorten it and curtail a little bit, great. But the supportability, as we've tried to recap a little bit, happens at peer level and then you build upon it. Yeah. And that's important for this when we talk about automation. It's not about just flipping on a switch with technology. And that's the part that somehow you need to get your operations teams, I won't say just manager, operations teams to make sure they're aware that it sounds easy. There's a reason why your team's still struggling and swamped today to try to support the tickets that they have.
Yeah.
Why are you going to put more responsibility on them when they can't handle the workload they already have?
Nah, you want to support them, find ways to automate. So this way they can continue to do the work that they're doing. Maybe through some of your automations, they can do what they do quicker.
Correct. But this is also about that collaboration. It's not about removing roles. It's about that collaboration, right?
No. It's like the way that AI, I guess, is more or less intended to operate. It's intended to make your operations simpler. You could do more with greater
visibility
and processing.
Yeah, it's about visibility. Yeah.
Going in the other direction. It sure is.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also where the alignment happens. So we said automation and alignment. This is also where the alignment happens, because when you realize that the automation's working the way it should, the visibility and the insight, et cetera, that's where the alignment's like, okay, governance is working. Because this is exactly the part where if this is not in place, your ITAM activities will tank.
Yeah.
I hate to leave it on a sour note like that, but it will. Because if you don't understand how you're doing for move out change, right? That's the part of asset management we typically don't know what happens because we're not performing that task.
need to go the other direction. If you do apply and consider these automations and the dashboard and reporting, then your ITAM business will thrive and will accelerate.
Correct. Absolutely. And actually, it doesn't just say asset management, it's the entire team accelerates.
Oh, yeah.
And that's an important part. It's a shared growth opportunity.
Business.
Well, Rob, we're at the top of the hour. We've been going crazy, but that's us, right? It's a great little dialogue happening. Any 15-second final wrap up on this one that comes to mind?
It really is all about supporting and bolstering the business. And if you can find ways to make these small incremental improvements, then that value can be realized all the way through. The feedback on that for you as an IT asset management or an IT asset management program manager is increased support and visibility to the leadership, to the executive team, to know that they don't have the concerns because you've got it covered, and this is how, and they're getting that additional value. So final thought for that.
Well, it's important, yes, absolutely, and being able to say what's good enough, what was good enough is not what is good enough today, and how can we further enhance it? Or in this case, you may have to downgrade where you were because you're going from, say, ServiceNow, which is actually more full. It's probably has a little bit more functionality than, say, Freshworks. I'm not trying to slam anybody. It's just a different type of functionality. Yeah. And you might have to tone it down compared to what you have. And I don't say that being remedial. I more say that work with the technology you have and grow upon it. But don't kick and scream. More about, say, provide that awareness to other team members. Say, this is where we were. This is where we are. We're going to struggle for a while because we can't get back to that functionality. The product's not going to show it to us, or we need to add another product to complement it. Again, I'm not trying to slam anybody in this one, but this is the reality you have in the environment. Mm-hmm. So that, again, it's how the alignment discussion. That's how you further build upon it, et cetera. Because you might find out it's like, oh, wow, yeah, we're doing okay, but is good enough good enough? Mm-hmm. So that's the part with automation. Again, you want some visibility, how you're doing the move add changes. You have lots of moving parts in the air, even with the Cmdb. Okay, so discovery comes in, updates it, great. But where's asset management on the backside of that for alignment? Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it. Have yourself a great rest of the day. See you, everyone, on Friday, and we'll continue on that point. Thanks, everybody.
Bye for now.